People always say time heals. That if you wait long enough, the ache dulls, the tears stop, and the memories settle like dust on an old photograph. But they're wrong, my dears. Time doesn't heal. It hides. It shifts the weight around, so you can carry it differently, quieter, slower, but it never really lets you put it down. I learned that the day my granddaughter walked past me and didn't know who I was, not forgot. No. Forgetting takes effort. Forgetting means something was once there. This child, my sweet girl, she didn't look at me with confusion or pause like I was a distant dream. She didn't look at all. She passed by like I was furniture, like I was no one. I stood there in the grocery store, holding a jar of strawberry jam, the kind she used to smear across toast in my kitchen when she was barely tall enough to reach the counter. And I watched her walk right past me with her earbuds in, her scarf flung over her shoulder like it meant something to someone. And child, I tell you, she didn't know my name. Not Grandma, not Nana, not even Margaret. I was invisible. You don't prepare for that moment. People warn you about your knees going bad, about your eyesight fading, about friends passing one by one, but they don't tell you about the heartbreak of being erased while you're still standing there, heart beating, breath shallow, memory sharp as ever. No one tells you how much it hurts to be alive and forgotten at the same time. But I'm not telling you this for pity. No, that's not why I dragged this old story out from where I buried it. I'm telling it because there's more to the silence, because people see a grandmother sitting alone on a bench and assume the story behind her must be soft, simple, sweet, all lullabies and cookies and crocheted blankets. But some stories, my sweethearts, are written in the silence, in the things we don't say, in the moments no one asks about. And mine, well, mine is messier than most. It's about family, about choices, about what happens when the truth is too heavy to tell, and the cost of carrying it anyway. So before I begin, my dears, do me one small kindness. Like this video. Subscribe if your heart tells you to, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I always imagine my words floating across oceans, landing in quiet living rooms and warm kitchens, right where they're needed most. Some stories must be told, even if they still bleed a little, even if no one's asking, even if the person you're telling it for isn't listening. Now, settle in, child. Let me take you back. Back before the silence, before the forgetting. Back to the days when the house smelled like cinnamon and sunflowers, and I still believed love could fix anything, you know. Child, there was a certain rhythm to life back then. Not rushed, not chaotic, just steady, like the ticking of Mama's old clock that sat on the mantel, chiming every hour whether we noticed or not. Morning routines had their own melody, Mama humming as she buttered toast, Daddy muttering about mill hours over black coffee, and us kids trying to tie our shoes and finish breakfast at the same time. The kitchen windows would fog up in the winter, and in the summer, the screens let in more than a few flies, but it was ours, that little space where the sun filtered in through yellow gingham curtains. That was the heart of our home. School days were predictable, but not without their magic. Miss Carson gave out gold stars for spelling tests and let me borrow books from the locked cabinet when I finished my work early. I remember one in particular, a story about Clara Barton. That's when I knew I wanted to help people, wanted to matter. I'd sit under the dogwood tree at recess, that book pressed against my knees, and dream about one day wearing a white uniform with a little red cross on my sleeve. Mama encouraged my dreaming, even if she didn't always understand it. She'd say, "Lord willing, Maggie, you'll go farther than this dirt town." And then she'd smile that soft smile of hers and tell me to wash up for supper. The smells of home are something you never forget, no matter how far you go. Bacon frying on Saturday mornings, cornbread baking in a cast iron skillet, Daddy's aftershave mixing with the scent of wood smoke. In the spring, Mama would open all the windows and let the scent of honeysuckle drift in. That smell still brings me to tears some days, like a ghost in bloom. Our holidays were humble, but full of love. Christmas wasn't about presents. Lord knows we didn't have much money, but Mama would make spiced cider, and we'd pop popcorn on the stove, stringing it with cranberries to hang on the tree. Daddy chopped down himself. He always picked one that leaned just a little, said it gave the room character, and every year, without fail, Earl would shake the wrapped boxes and guess wrong every time. We'd laugh until our sides hurt. Easter meant new dresses, usually hand-sewn by Mama, and a big breakfast before church. We'd walk the gravel road, baskets in hand, and the church ladies would fuss over how much we'd grown. I loved those mornings, not because of the eggs or the candy, but because of the way Mama looked in the sunshine, proud, upright, as if holding our whole family together with nothing but willpower and a good pair of heels. But child, it wasn't always joy. There were days when the weight of the world crept in, days Daddy didn't talk much, days Mama seemed somewhere far away even while stirring the beans. The mill wasn't a kind place. Accidents happened, jobs got cut, and sometimes Daddy would come home with more silence than words. We learned not to ask too many questions on those nights, just passed the cornbread and kept our voices low. I didn't understand back then how much Mama carried. She was younger than I am now, but to me she seemed like a giant. She could sew a hem while rocking a baby and fixing supper all at once. Her hands were always busy. I don't think she knew how to rest. There's a kind of strength in women like her, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't ask for praise, just keeps moving, keeps loving, even when her own heart is worn thin. Summers were a whole world of their own. Daddy would take us fishing sometimes, though he wasn't much for talking while he did it. Just sat there in the boat, chewing on a toothpick, eyes scanning the water like it held all the answers. I liked those mornings, not because of the fish. I never liked the smell, but because of the peace. The silence between us was a kind of bond. When it got too hot, we'd find our way to the creek. Lord, that creek. Cold enough to make your bones ache, but it felt like freedom. We'd jump in with our clothes still on, screaming and laughing, letting the water wash away every worry we didn't know we had. Mama would fuss about the muddy footprints later, but we always got away with it. Ruthie and I used to pick blackberries till our fingers were purple. She'd sneak sugar from her mama's pantry, and we'd sit behind the chicken coop dipping the berries in it, telling stories about the lives we'd have one day. She wanted to move to Nashville. I just wanted out. Out of the house, out of the town, out of the quiet expectations that wrapped around me like a wool blanket in August. We were dreamers, and dreams are loud things, even in quiet towns. One summer, I remember Ruthie dared me to climb the water tower, just to the first rung, she said, eyes wild with mischief, but before I knew it, we were halfway up, the wind pulling at our skirts and the whole town looking like a dollhouse below. We weren't afraid of much back then, not heights, not boys, not the ticking of time. That came later. That came with age. I suppose I should tell you about the boys too. It wasn't all peaches and hymns, you know. There was a boy named James who used to walk me home from school. He was tall, freckled, always smelled faintly of motor oil. His daddy ran the only garage in town. James would offer me penny candy from his coat pocket and asked questions no one else bothered to, like what book I was reading, or if I believed in angels. He kissed me once behind the church, shy and soft, like he was asking permission from the wind itself, but I didn't fall in love then. I thought I did. I wrote his name in the margins of my school books and imagined our wedding, like girls do. But it wasn't love. It was curiosity. Tender, innocent curiosity. Love, the kind that changes you, that came later, and it didn't come easy. Back then, love was something you saw in the way Mama poured Daddy's coffee, even on the days they weren't speaking, or how she folded his shirts just right, smoothing the collar with that little flick of her wrist. It was quiet, dutiful, rooted deep like an old oak, unmoving, whether the storm came or not. In the fall, I used to walk to school with leaves crunching under my feet, the smell of chimney smoke lingering in the air. I remember how the wind would tug at my scarf and how the world felt on the edge of something, not dying, but shifting. Even as a girl, I felt that ache of change coming. The county fair was our big event each year. Tents and lights and music that made your feet want to dance, even if you didn't know how. I once won second place for a lemon pound cake I'd made with Mama's old recipe. The ribbon still sits in my sewing box, all frayed and faded, but I keep it. Not for the prize, but for the look on Mama's face when they called my name, like she saw a part of herself in me that day. And child, the first time I ever saw the ocean. Oh, let me tell you, Daddy surprised us with a trip to Galveston one summer. It was the first time we'd ever been more than 2 counties away. I remember stepping out of the car, the wind thick with salt and the gulls crying overhead, and I just stood there, like the whole world had cracked open, and something holy was spilling out. I dipped my toes into that endless blue, and for a moment, I believed anything was possible, that I could grow wings, that I could become someone entirely new. We came home sunburned and giddy, Mama's hair tangled from the sea breeze, and Daddy quieter than usual. I think the ocean stirred something in all of us that we didn't have the words for. And then, time passed, the way it always does, quiet and rude. Ruthie got a job in town, started seeing a boy who drove a truck too fast and spoke too soft. My brothers started shaving, getting into trouble, asking questions with hard edges. Mama's hands began to ache, Daddy's back grew stiffer, and I kept baking, kept dreaming, kept waiting for the page to turn. One night, I sat on the roof with Ruthie, watching a thunderstorm roll in over the hills. The sky lit up in veins of white and purple, and she said, "Do you think we'll ever really get out of here?" I didn't know how to answer then. I just took her hand and held it, because that's the truth of those years. Child, we didn't have many answers. We had moments, little flashes of joy and wonder stitched together with chores and duty and small town expectations, and we tried, in our own quiet ways, to make them last. You never think it's the end of something while you're still in it. You think the porch will always be there, that the songs will always play, that Mama will always be in the kitchen humming about nothing at all. But those days don't last forever, and when they're gone, they leave echoes. I still hear them when the wind shifts just right, or when I bake cinnamon rolls and the smell reminds me of Saturday mornings when I was 10 and the world was whole. That's the thing about innocence. You don't notice it until it's already behind you. But it was mine. Every sticky summer, every frostbitten morning, every whispered dream under the sycamore tree, they were mine. They shaped me, held me, until the world asked me to let go. And, eventually, I did. Her eyes weren't looking at me, not really. They were looking through me, like she was watching someone else, somewhere else. That's when I knew something was truly wrong. Not just tired, not just worn down. Something deeper, something slipping. We called the preacher's wife, who'd done some nursing back in the war. She came by that afternoon, laid her hands on Mama's forehead, and didn't say much, just pressed her lips tight, like she was trying to keep the truth from falling out. "She needs a doctor," she whispered to Daddy in the hallway, thinking I couldn't hear. "Now, Raymond, not later." Daddy didn't argue, he just nodded and went to hitch the truck. I rode in the bed on the way to the hospital, clutching the hem of Mama's quilt like it could protect me from whatever we were driving toward. I remember the smell of diesel, the sting of wind in my eyes, the way Mama's breath rattled like dry leaves every time we hit a bump. They kept her for 3 nights. I stayed in the waiting room, sleeping in a hard plastic chair with my Bible under my arm, praying for something I didn't have words for yet. On the 4th day, a doctor called us in. He didn't use gentle words. Back then, men spoke plain, even when the truth was cruel. "Lung cancer," he said. "Too advanced for surgery. Too late for much of anything." Daddy didn't say a word, just stood there, his hat in his hands, staring at the floor like it might answer back. I started crying and couldn't stop. Not even when we got back to the house. Not even when Ruthie came by with a covered dish and tried to hold me like she did when we were kids. Mama was only 40-2. She lasted until the first frost. By then, she wasn't eating, wasn't speaking, just breathing, barely, and holding my hand when she had the strength. Her hands were still warm. That's what I remember most. Even with everything else falling away, her voice, her hair, her body, her hands stayed warm. And when she finally let go, it was like a door closed inside me. After the funeral, the world didn't stop, though a part of me thought it should. Daddy went back to the mill. The boys kept going to school. The church ladies brought casseroles and pies we didn't eat. And I floated, like I was outside my own skin. That's when the second crack formed. Not loud, just quiet. It started with Ruthie, sweet red-haired. Ruthie, she was the only one who could get me to laugh, even a little. We'd sit by the creek again, same as before, but nothing felt the same. One night, we laid back on the grass, watching the stars. I told her I didn't know how to keep going without Mama. "You just do," she whispered. "You wake up, you make the biscuits, you go on." Believed her. I wanted to believe her, but then she changed to ... She started missing our Sunday walks, started hanging around town with the older boys. One in particular, Daryl Blanchard, had a car and too much confidence. Ruthie started wearing lipstick, started smoking, started laughing like she didn't remember how quiet we used to be together. One afternoon, I found her behind the feed store, crying, her dress torn, her lipstick smeared. He said he loved me, she sobbed, but he didn't mean it. I held her so tight, like I could keep the pieces from falling apart, but they did anyway. And a month later, she was gone. Her daddy shipped her off to an aunt in Alabama, far from the whispers and shame. Never saw her again. Another crack. And then came Henry. My youngest brother, just 12 that fall. Sweet, freckled Henry, who still slept with a flashlight under his pillow and kissed Mama's photo goodnight. He started getting quiet, stopped doing his chores, would disappear for hours, come home muddy, sullen, angry at the world. One day, I caught him behind the barn with a bottle of Daddy's whiskey. When I tried to take it, he shoved me, hard. First time anyone ever laid a hand on me in anger. I hate this house, he yelled. I hate everything in it. I wanted to scream back, wanted to shake him, but I didn't, because I understood, everything was changing. Or maybe it had already changed, and we were just waking up to the ruins. It was the winter after. Ruthie left when I met him. His name was Jack. He came into the bakery one Thursday morning. The kind of morning where the cold felt like a warning. I was behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, sugar on my cheek, kneading dough like it might hold me together. He ordered coffee and a jelly-filled cruller, but it wasn't the order I remembered. It was the way he looked at me, like he saw something everyone else had forgotten. He wasn't from town. You could tell by the way he stood, too straight, too sure. Said he'd come from Michigan for mill work, staying in a rented room above the hardware store. He wore a green army coat even though he'd never served, and he had that kind of voice that made you lean in, not loud, just steady. I wasn't looking for anything, not then. I was still treading water in a world that no longer made sense, but Jack had a way of making things feel possible again. He started showing up every morning, sometimes twice a day, always with a joke, or a compliment, or a story that didn't quite add up but made you want to hear more. You ever think about leaving this place? He asked me once, while I wiped down the counter. Seeing what's out there. All the time, I said, before I could stop myself. He smiled then, wide and real. Maybe one day we go together. I should have been wary. Should have asked more questions, should have wondered why a man in his 20s, with no family and no past, had come to a town like ours, looking for something that smelled like home. But I didn't. I was 18, and tired, and lonely, and flattered. So when he asked if I wanted to go for a drive one Sunday afternoon, just a drive, nothing more, I said yes. I didn't tell Daddy. I didn't tell anyone. He took me to the lake, the same lake where we used to have 4th of July potlucks, and where I'd once watched fireflies with Ruthie under the stars. It looked different now, colder, quieter. Jack laid out a blanket and handed me a thermos of cocoa like we were in a picture book. He didn't kiss me that day. He didn't have to. The seed was planted. We started meeting in secret, drives that lasted too long, hands that lingered too long, questions I didn't ask. By spring, I was in love. Or something I thought was love. The kind that fills your chest so full it aches. The kind that makes you ignore the way he flinches when you ask about his family. The kind that forgives too quickly and questions too late. He never raised his voice, never hurt me, not then. But love, child. Love isn't always kind. Sometimes it sneaks in through your softest places, wraps itself around your ribs, and squeezes. The first real fight I ever had with Daddy was about Jack. He'd found a note in my coat pocket, nothing scandalous, just a folded paper with a line Jack had scribbled. You're the only place I've ever felt safe. Daddy came into my room, quiet, but with thunder in his eyes. Who is he? I stared at the floor. He's not from here, doesn't go to church, doesn't come calling Papa, and you're sneaking around like you've got something to hide. I opened my mouth to speak, but he raised his hand, not to hit me, never that, just to stop me from saying what he couldn't bear to hear. I lost your mother, he said. I'm not losing you too. But he already had, not fully, not forever, just enough. That night, I packed a small suitcase, just a few dresses, my mother's Bible, and a photograph of us taken the Christmas before she got sick. Jack met me by the railroad tracks at midnight, engine running, smile wide. You sure? He asked. No, I wasn't, but I nodded anyway, and just like that, the town I'd known my whole life faded in the rearview mirror, streetlights like stars, getting smaller, softer, until they disappeared. The next part of this story, my dear, gets colder. Not in temperature, but in truth it didn't happen all at once. That's the hardest part to explain when people ask about the moment everything broke. There wasn't one moment, no loud crash or explosion, no scream echoing through a hallway, just little shifts, like a hairline crack in a porcelain plate, invisible, until one day it splits clean in two. Jack and I moved into a two-room apartment above a tailor's shop. It smelled of mothballs and starch, and the pipes groaned every time someone ran water downstairs. I pretended it was charming. I pretended a lot back then. At first, things weren't awful. He'd bring me coffee in the mornings. He'd kiss my temple like I was precious. He talked about opening his own auto garage someday. "You'll run the books," he said. "We'll make it ours." But then, the hours got longer. The silences stretched. He stopped asking how my day was. He started drinking in the evenings. Just one or two at first, then more. Always promising he was just tired. Always brushing me off when I asked if he was okay. Told myself men carried burdens differently. That he just needed time. That love meant waiting out the storms. But one evening, he came home late, reeking of whiskey and something else I didn't recognize. And when I reached for his coat, he pulled away. Too fast, too sharp. His eyes were glassy. "Don't mother me." It was the first time he ever spoke to me like that. Cold, dismissive, and child. I wish I could say it was the last. But the crack had begun. I lost the job at the bakery a few weeks later. They said they had to cut staff, but I saw the way Miss Lillian looked at me. Pity in her eyes, but also disappointment. She'd heard the whispers. Small towns have big mouths. People noticed when your husband stayed out late. People noticed when you came in with tired eyes and bruises that looked like accidents. I told her thank you, then went into the alley behind the bakery and cried until my chest hurt. Jack said we'd be fine, that I didn't need to work, but rent went unpaid that month. Then the electricity got cut off. Then he sold the radio, the one thing I brought from home that still made me feel like me. I tried to talk to him. I begged him to tell me what was happening, but he'd just say, "You think I don't know how hard this is? You think I'm not doing everything I can?" Then came the silence. The kind that lives in the walls, the kind that makes you question your own reflection. One night, I woke to find the apartment empty, the bed cold, his coat gone. I waited. 1 hour, then 2, then 5. He didn't come home that night, or the next. On the third day, I walked down to the mechanic shop, where he sometimes worked under the table. They told me he hadn't shown up in a week. That was the first time I understood he might not be coming back. The second time was when the landlord knocked on the door with an envelope in his hand, no return address, just my name. Inside was a single $20 bill, and a note. "You're strong. You'll figure it out." That was all. That was all he left me with. I spent the next 3 days in bed, no food, no light, just silence and shame. I didn't call Daddy. I couldn't. What would I say? "You were right. I should have listened. Please come get me." No, child. Pride is a cruel companion, and back then, mine was louder than my pain. I pawned my mother's Bible for grocery money, sold a photograph of us at Christmas for 10 cents to a stranger who liked the frame, took a job cleaning rooms at the roadside motel, scrubbing sheets that never seemed clean no matter how hard I worked. Sometimes I'd hear the door to room 6 creak open, and I'd think, "He's back." But it was never him. Of course it wasn't. One night, while changing the sheets in room 4, I found a woman's wedding ring tucked into the pillowcase. I stood there staring at it for what felt like forever, and then, I laughed like a mad woman child. Alone in a room that wasn't mine, holding someone else's lost promises. That night, I walked out of the motel without finishing my shift. I walked to the nearest church, sat in the back pew, and let myself fall apart. Not pretty tears, not quiet sobs, just years of held-in, grief, betrayal, disappointment, all pouring out of me like floodwaters. And do you want to know the worst part? No one even noticed. No one turned around. No one came to sit beside me. And that's when I knew I wasn't just alone. I was invisible. I didn't know what grief really was. Not when Ruthie's brother didn't come back from the war. Not when Mama got sick and never fully healed. Not even when Jack started disappearing piece by piece. First in presence, then in love, then in name. But abandonment. That's a kind of grief that gets into your bones. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It tells you you're not enough in 1,000 different ways. It doesn't just take your husband. It takes the version of you that believed in forever. I kept thinking he'd come back. I made the bed every morning like he was just out running an errand. I folded his clothes and kept them in the drawer. I left the porch light on even though we didn't have a porch, and I stopped looking at the calendar, because each day that passed without him was another punch to the gut. There were no goodbye kisses, no explanations, no final arguments, just that note, "You're strong, you'll figure it out." What a coward's blessing. A week after he left, I walked 3 miles to the grocery store because the bus fare was too much. The cashier, Miss Ellie, who used to give me the day-old bread for free when I was little, looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. I had hollow cheeks and wild eyes and a tin of beans in my hand. "Jack, gone?" she asked, soft as a prayer. Didn't answer. She rang up the beans and handed them to me without charging. "Don't be too proud, Maggie. People will help if you let 'em." But I was proud. Too proud to tell Daddy, too proud to go home, too proud to fall apart in public, so I kept the shame tucked under my coat and wore it like armor. The worst part wasn't being alone. The worst part was what the silence made me become. I started hearing his voice in my head, not the sweet one, not the one that promised me a house with a porch swing and babies with his dimples. No, the voice I heard was sharp. "You think you're better than me. You're just some sad little girl from a nothing town. You got lucky with me." Over and over, like a broken record on the inside. I believed him. That's what betrayal does, child. It teaches you to doubt the parts of yourself that used to feel solid. It takes your reflection and warps it until you can't quite remember who you used to be. I began to forget things. I'd leave the kettle boiling until the water was gone. I'd put on shoes that didn't match. Once, I walked all the way to the bus stop holding a candle, thinking it was my purse. People started whispering, "She's not right in the head since Jack left. She always was a bit fragile. She should go home to her daddy." But I didn't go home. I couldn't. Going home meant facing Mama's ghost and Daddy's disappointment. It was winter when I hit bottom. The apartment ran out of oil. The windows were frosted on the inside. My breath hung in the air like a ghost. I huddled under 3 blankets, wearing all my clothes, eating crackers dipped in water because I had no milk. And then one night I lit the stove to warm the kitchen and sat beside it, holding my hands over the flame, wondering what would happen if I just stayed there. Not because I wanted to die, not exactly, but because I didn't know what I was still living for. And then there was a knock. Not the landlord, not the mailman, not Jack. It was Ruthie. God bless that girl. She walked in like she still belonged in my life. She didn't ask permission. She didn't flinch when she saw me. She took one look around the room, one look at me, and said, "Okay, that's enough. We're getting out of here." I didn't argue. Because when someone finally sees you, really sees you after you've spent months fading into wallpaper, you grab their hand like it's a lifeline, and it was. We went back to her mama's house, a small, warm place that smelled like cornbread and lavender and second chances. Her mama gave me a hot bath and a plate of food, never asked questions, just said, "You can stay as long as you need." I stayed 3 weeks, long enough to sleep again, to laugh once. Just once, at something Ruthie said about her new boyfriend and his bad dancing. To hear Patsy Cline on the radio and not cry. One day, Ruthie sat next to me on the porch and said, "You were never broken, Maggie, just bent. There's a difference." And I started to believe her, just a little, just enough. But I need you to understand, child, the wound didn't heal clean, it closed crooked. It still aches when it rains. And sometimes, even now, I wonder what I did wrong, but then I remember, I didn't walk away, he did, and that, my darling, is the difference between a mistake and a betrayal. I didn't bounce back. You don't bounce when the floor gives way, you fall, and sometimes you keep falling, even after you've landed. The worst part wasn't that Jack left, it's that nobody came looking, no apology from his family, no call from his mama, who once called me the daughter she never had. No friends dropping by to check on me, as if his leaving made me contagious. That's the thing about heartbreak in a small town. It echoes louder because there are fewer places to hide. I couldn't go to church anymore. Couldn't stand the pitiful smiles, the sideways glances. Couldn't handle Sister May whispering behind her hymnal like I wasn't right there in the pew beside her. Poor thing, must have done something to drive him away. What I did was believe him. That's all. The days bled together. I stopped brushing my hair. I'd make coffee and forget to drink it. Sometimes I just sat by the window for hours, watching people live like I used to. Evenings were the worst. That's when the shadows came. Not outside, inside, in my chest, in the quiet. I'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, begging the silence to say something back. Once, I found myself talking to a framed photo of us, him in that navy blue sweater I'd knit, me in a dress I wore the day we bought our first sofa on credit. I asked it questions. I cursed at it. I told it stories like it could still hear me. That's how loneliness works. It makes fools of the proud and ghosts of the living. I tried writing letters, not to send, just to survive. Dear Jack, how do you sleep? What did I miss? What signs did I ignore? Did I bore you? Was I too much? Not enough. I filled pages with words that would never be read, tucked them into a shoebox beneath the bed like a collection of unanswered prayers. One day, I went down to the post office just to feel something, even if it was just air and fluorescent lighting. Old Mr. Gilmore at the desk looked up at me and said, "Thought you'd moved." Jack filed a change of address. I just nodded. Went outside, threw up in the hydrangeas. I tried going home to Daddy once, just once. He opened the door, looked me up and down, then said, "Well, look who it is." He didn't mean it cruel. That was just Daddy, full of thorns and thunder. He was never good at softness. Mama used to soften the hard parts of him, like warm hands on a cold back. Without her, he was all bark. But when I stepped inside, I realized what I had feared all along. It didn't feel like home anymore. The wallpaper was the same. The furniture still creaked in all the same places, but Mama's humming was gone, and the light that used to live in the corners had packed up and left. I stayed one night in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling stars I'd painted when I was 10, and I realized I'd outgrown this house and the girl I was in it, so I left before breakfast that winter. I took a job cleaning offices at night. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't hopeful, but it was something. It paid enough to keep me warm, and gave me a reason to move my body. I'd push the mop bucket down empty hallways lit by buzzing bulbs, listening to the echo of my own steps. Sometimes I'd sing to myself quiet little nothings, mostly hymns. I half-remembered. No one saw me, which was both a mercy and a wound. One night, I found an old envelope in my coat pocket. No return address, no name, just the single slip of paper inside, written in all capital letters, like someone didn't trust their own handwriting. "You deserve more." No explanation. No signature. To this day, I don't know who wrote it. Ruthie swore it wasn't her, but I kept that note. I still have it. Some nights, I held on to it like a lifeline, a stranger's belief standing in for my own child. I won't lie and say I healed quickly. I didn't find God again, or joy again, or laughter again, all in one day. Healing wasn't a sunrise. It was a flickering candle. Sometimes steady, sometimes not. Sometimes I had to relight it myself. There were setbacks. I had one night where I threw every dish I owned against the wall. I had another where I didn't speak for 3 days straight, not to the clerk, not to the landlord, not even to Ruthie, but each time, somehow, I came back, even if only by inches. And that's the thing, child. People think breaking is dramatic, like shattering glass or storming out in the rain. But often, it's quiet, it's losing your laughter, it's forgetting your favorite song, it's sitting in your kitchen and realizing you haven't said your name out loud in days, but you can come back, piece by crooked piece. Heart first, then voice, then fire. Child, you won't always feel brave when you're surviving. Sometimes, survival just looks like brushing your teeth, getting up when the bed is warmer than the world, feeding yourself when grief has made you hollow. Survival is rarely loud. It's not the stuff of novels. It's quiet, relentless, and sacred. After Jack left, I didn't have the luxury of unraveling all the way I wanted to. Oh, how I wanted to lie down and never get back up. But then the bills came, the landlord knocking, the final notice envelopes piling up like snowdrifts on the table. So I stood up, not out of courage, out of necessity. I took every job I could, cleaned offices by night, waited tables at the diner on weekends, babysat the Stevens twins after school, 2 toddlers with the energy of wild ponies and the patience of gnats. Sometimes, I'd sit on their kitchen floor while they napped, drinking cold coffee and staring at the peeling linoleum, not thinking, just existing. Because even thoughts felt too heavy. Money was tight. Tighter than I'd ever known. I learned how to stretch a can of soup across 3 meals. how to sew patches over patches, how to smile when the electricity flickered because smiling made it feel like I had control. Ruthie would drop by sometimes, uninvited. She'd bring cornbread or lentil stew. She never said, "I'm worried about you." She didn't have to. She just sat, talked about her day, let me be human again, not just broken. One night, when the pipes froze and I couldn't afford a plumber, she brought her brother with a wrench and a space heater. Didn't ask, just acted. That's what grace looks like, not pity, but presence. Remember one day in particular that it was raining, the kind of rain that makes the whole sky ache. I'd just finished mopping the bank lobby. My back hurt, my fingers were raw, and as I was leaving, the manager, some man in a tie whose name I'd never bothered to learn, looked at me and said, "You missed a spot," just like that. No hello, no thank you, and for a split second, I almost snapped, I almost screamed, but instead, I bent back down and wiped that damn spot. Then I walked outside, got in my car, and cried like a woman with nothing left to lose, because it wasn't about the spot, it was about all of it. The indignity, the invisibility, the exhaustion of being strong every single day when no one is watching. But I didn't quit, because I couldn't, because no one was coming to save me. That winter, I caught pneumonia, didn't have the insurance to see a real doctor, went to the free clinic instead, where the nurse looked 20 and the antibiotics tasted like chalk. Still, I worked, coughed through double shifts, wrapped my ribs in an old scarf to keep them warm. That's survival too, knowing you're not okay, but moving anyway. And somewhere in the middle of all that, surviving, something shifted. Not suddenly, not beautifully, but slowly, like a thaw. I started keeping a journal again. Not for Jack, for me. I wrote things like, "You're still here. You worked a double shift with a fever, that matters. You didn't cry today, that's something." Small victories, but sometimes small victories are the only kind you get. I began baking again. Not like before, not pies for celebration, or cakes for guests. No, I baked bread, hard, crusty loaves with soft centers, bread that fed me and reminded me that my hands could still make things. There's something holy about bread, something ancient. It rises even when you don't. Ruthie once asked me how I kept going. I didn't have a poetic answer. I told her, because no one else will do it for me. But the truth is deeper. I kept going because somewhere deep inside, beneath the heartbreak, the debt, the shame, I still believed in the girl I used to be, the one with flour on her hands, the one who danced to Patsy Cline while scrubbing the floors, the one who looked at the stars and saw possibilities. I wanted to meet her again, to become her, but stronger. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror and saw her flicker back. Not all at once, just a glimmer in the eyes, a lift in the chin. And I whispered, "You made it another day." That became my ritual. Each morning, no matter how tired, how bitter, how bruised, I'd look at myself and say, "You made it another day." It wasn't pretty, child. Survival never is. It's stained aprons, late notices, coughing through your shift, smiling through your pain. But it's also something more. It's grit. It's hope. Wearing work boots. It's love for yourself in its rawest, fiercest form. You don't survive because you're fearless. You survive because somewhere deep inside, you still believe there's something on the other side of the pain. And you know what? There is. But we'll get to that later. For now, just know, I made it. Not by magic, not by miracle, but by putting one foot in front of the other. Even when they bled. Child. There's a kind of strength that doesn't come with shouting or fists on the table. It's the quiet kind, the kind that wakes up every morning, ties her apron, and starts the day even when her heart feels like a cracked plate. After everything that happened, the betrayal, the sickness, the silence that filled our home like smoke, I still had the boys, and that meant I had no choice but to keep moving. Tommy stopped talking for a while after Harold left, just sat at the edge of the bed, hugging that old stuffed bear till the fur rubbed clean off its face. Henry would pretend like everything was fine, acting like a little man before his time, helping me carry firewood or sweep the floor. And Earl, he ran wild. Trouble had always followed that boy, but now he started picking fights at school, climbing up onto the roof just to scare me, testing the world to see if anything still cared enough to stop him. I did. I cared, even when it hurt. I got a job cleaning houses in town. It didn't pay much, but it was honest work. I'd wake before the sun and take the bus to towns over wore the same scuffed shoes all winter, patched the heels with cardboard just to make them last. My hands got so dry from bleach and soap, they cracked and bled, but I'd still come home, fix dinner, help with homework, and tuck each boy in with a kiss on the forehead. I remember one night, I came home with blisters so raw I couldn't close my fists. I sat at the kitchen table, crying into my tea, and Henry, sweet, serious Henry, he knelt beside me, pressed his tiny palm over mine, and said, "Don't worry, Mama, I'll be rich someday. You won't have to clean ever again." I smiled through tears, not because I believed it, though maybe some part of me wanted to, but because I needed to hear it. We all need something to hope for, even if it's just a little boy's promise. Ruthie still came by. She'd bring me leftovers from her supper, or slip $1 or $2 in my coat pocket when I wasn't looking. We'd sit on the porch and talk about everything and nothing. Some evenings, we'd just sit in silence, watching the sun go down behind the old oaks. I think she understood, in a way no one else could. We were two women who had been burned by the same fire, learning how to breathe in the smoke. I started baking again, not for joy like I used to, but for survival. Pies, mostly, apple, peach, pecan when I could afford the nuts, sold them at the church bake sales, and sometimes folks would place special orders. That little bit of money helped buy school books, fix the heater, or replace shoes that were falling apart. I also picked up sewing again, mending clothes for neighbors, hemming dresses, fixing torn collars. Folks started saying, "You want something patched right, you bring it to Maggie." That meant something to me. It reminded me I wasn't invisible. There was dignity in work. Not glamour, not ease, but dignity. A sense that I was still here, still contributing, still standing on my own 2 feet. Even so, there were nights I laid awake and asked God if this was all there was, if the rest of my life would just be laundry and aching feet, cold coffee, and waiting for the boys to come home safe. I wasn't asking for riches, just a little softness, a little kindness that didn't come with a cost. One afternoon, I found a bird's nest on the windowsill, 3 tiny blue eggs tucked in a bed of straw and thread. I stood there staring at it for the longest time. Those eggs, they didn't know what kind of world they'd be born into, but their mama had built them a home anyway, and I thought, that's all I can do. Keep building, keep protecting, keep believing that maybe, just maybe, the hard days would give way to something softer. Even when the weight felt unbearable, I never let it stop me. That's not to say I didn't cry. I did, often and alone, but every time I wept, I reminded myself, you've survived worse. You survived Mama's sickness. You survived Harold's lies. You survived your own heart cracking wide open, and you're still breathing. So I kept going, child, because sometimes that's the bravest thing a woman can do. You know, child, some truths don't knock. They slip in through the back door, quiet as dust, and settle right beside you before you even realize they've arrived. It had been nearly 20 years since Harold walked out of my life. I'd stopped looking over my shoulder long ago, stopped replaying old arguments in the shower, stopped checking the mail for his name. I had buried that pain so deep, I nearly convinced myself it never happened. By then, the boys were grown. Henry was working for the post office, steady and dependable like always. Earl had joined the army, then settled out west. And Tommy, well, Tommy had moved up north with his wife, a quiet girl who wore her sadness like jewelry. I was proud of them, each one, but I missed them fiercely. My house had grown quiet, not sad, just still, the kind of quiet that comes when the world doesn't need you in quite the same way it used to. I spent most of my days gardening, reading, going to church, and writing letters I never sent. Life had become routine, simple, predictable, until the letter arrived. It came in a pale blue envelope, tucked between bills and a grocery store flyer. No return address, just my name, Maggie, written in slanted handwriting I hadn't seen in decades. I didn't open it at first, just stood at the kitchen counter, staring at it like it was something alive, something dangerous. When I finally did, my hands trembled. It was from a woman named Judith, someone I didn't know, or at least didn't remember. Her handwriting was neat, careful. She wrote, "I believe we may be related. I'm searching for the truth about my father. He left before I was born. I never met him, but I found old photographs in my mother's things. One of them had your name on the back. Maggie, I think. I think Harold might be my father, child." I sat down so hard I thought the chair would give out beneath me. Harold, that name, like a bruise pressed too hard. I read that letter 3 times. Then I put it away. Didn't sleep that night. Just sat on the porch wrapped in my shawl, rocking back and forth, asking God if this was some cruel joke, a test, a trick of memory, but it wasn't single quotes. The next morning, I wrote her back. Short, polite, cautious. I knew Harold. I was married to him. I haven't seen him in over 2 decades. I don't know where he is, or what became of him. I'm sorry I can't help more. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't single quotes. 2 weeks later she wrote again, this time with copies of photographs, one of Harold in his younger years, arm around a woman, who was not me. Another of a little girl with Harold's chin, and my son's eyes. Judith. She was his daughter, born a year before he left me. He had another family, a secret one. He'd been living a lie, to both of us. I stared at that photo, until the ink blurred with tears. All those years I'd spent blaming myself, wondering what I could have done differently, and all along, he had already left me in his heart. Long before his feet followed, the betrayal sank deeper than it had the first time, because now I saw the full picture. The pattern, the choice. He hadn't just abandoned me, he had replaced me. I didn't know what to do with that. With her, with Judith. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was just a girl, searching for her father, but her existence reopened wounds I thought had scarred over. Still, I couldn't turn away, so I met her. We arranged to meet at a diner off the highway, neutral ground. I wore my best blouse, curled my hair, and sat by the window with my hands folded tight in my lap. She walked in wearing navy blue, tall, serious, eyes like Henry's, nervous smile, a slight shake in her hand as she reached for mine. She said, "Hi, Maggie, thank you for meeting me." And I said, "I don't know what you're hoping to find, but I'll tell you everything I can." We sat there for hours, talking, drinking coffee, swapping pieces of a puzzle neither of us wanted to be holding. She told me her mother had never spoken much about Harold, said he was charming, but distant, gone by the time Judith was born. No support, no explanation, just silence. I told her about the night he left, about the empty dresser drawers, about the way he looked at our sons and then turned his back on them, about the letter I found that wasn't even addressed to me. And then, I did something unexpected. I took out my wallet and showed her a photo. It was old, yellowed at the edges, a picture of me and Harold, holding baby Henry in front of our first Christmas tree. She stared at it for a long time. "I don't have any pictures of him," she said, "not even one." And so I gave it to her. "Take it," I said. "He doesn't live in it anymore," she cried, right there in the booth, behind her cup of cold tea. And I realized something. We were both abandoned, both lied to, both cheated out of a full truth. But we were not each other's enemies. That night, after I got home, I sat by the window and breathed deeper than I had in years. The air felt lighter, not because the pain was gone, but because it had been witnessed, spoken aloud. Judith and I kept in touch. Slowly, carefully. She even came for Christmas once, brought me a scarf she'd knitted herself, sat beside me in church, her voice quiet as we sang "O Holy Night." The boys didn't know what to make of her at first. I didn't push, but over time, they accepted her. Maybe not as a sister, not fully, but as someone who shared their blood, their story, their wound. And for me, it was a turning point. Not because it healed everything, but because it reminded me that truth matters, that silence protects no one, and that even after all the damage, all the cracks, life can still offer us connection, even when it comes late, even when it arrives in a pale, blue envelope. I held them in my lap like relics. The paper was worn, some ink faded. His voice, though it was clear, "I'm sorry for what I did. I didn't know how to be the man you needed. I still think about Henry's laugh, about how you danced in the kitchen." Each letter was a bruise, not because of what they said, but because I never got to read them when it mattered. He'd written about his regrets, about watching us from afar, unsure if we'd ever want him back, about the night he left, how he sat in the car for an hour before driving off, crying like a boy who couldn't find his way home. I should have turned back. I thought disappearing would hurt less than staying and breaking everything. Slowly, child, let me tell you something. There are wounds that cut deep, but there's a special kind of pain in realizing someone did care. They just never had the courage to show up. I didn't cry when I read the first letter, or the second, but by the fifth, when he talked about seeing Tommy's name in the newspaper for making the honor roll, I wept, ugly, shaking sobs. The kind that come from years of holding still. I wasn't weeping for him though. I was weeping for her. The woman I was. The one who waited by the window. The one who blamed herself when it was never hers to carry. Judith and I sat on my porch the next evening. I made sweet tea, even though the air was already thick with summer. She held one of the letters on her lap, gently folded. He was complicated, she said. I nodded. So was loving him. That's when she looked up and asked the question I hadn't let myself wonder out loud. Do you forgive him? I didn't answer right away. I watched a robin pecking at the dry grass, its wings quivering with each hop. I don't know if I do, I said finally, but I think I forgive myself. That night, I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where I used to pack lunches and iron church blouses, and I started writing a letter. Not to him, to me. To the woman who held the line, who didn't break when everything around her did, who raised boys into men without a roadmap, who found beauty in chipped dishes and morning light through thin curtains. Dear Maggie, you did good, even when nobody told you, even when you doubted, even when you cried into dishwater and kept going anyway. You loved, you hoped, you stayed. I folded the letter and tucked it into my Bible, right between the Psalms and the pressed rose from my mother's funeral. Sometimes, the turning point isn't a big explosion. Sometimes, it's a quiet moment when you realize you're no longer waiting for the apology, because you've already healed past it. A few weeks later, Ava came to visit. She looked so much like him, but softer, kinder, maybe. She brought her own daughter, a curious little thing with bright eyes and a head full of curls. And just like that, our table had laughter again. New stories, new names, new hope. She called me Miss Maggie at first. But by the time they left, she leaned in, hugged me tight, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma and child." I broke, but this time, it wasn't grief. It was grace. Grace for the life I lost. Grace for the life I lived. And grace for the love I thought I'd never feel again. The weeks that followed were quiet, but not still. Do you understand the difference? Stillness is peace. Quiet, after discovery, is heavy. The kind of silence where thoughts stretch and grow long shadows, where your heart walks barefoot across old memories, each one sharp like broken glass. The letters stayed in a box under my bed, wrapped in an old tea towel like something sacred or cursed. I didn't read them again, not for a while. I needed space to feel what they meant without drowning in the words. Instead, I wandered the house like a stranger, not sad, not angry, just ... unfamiliar. The same walls, the same floorboards, but I wasn't the same woman who walked them last week. I'd known pain, I'd carried grief. But this was something else. This was the knowledge that life had offered me truth, and I had no idea what to do with it. It was Tommy who noticed first. He stopped by one morning, unannounced, like he used to in his younger years when he needed laundry done, or wanted to hide from his wife's sharp tongue. He brought donuts and a coffee I didn't ask for, sat at my table like it was still 1983, and waited. I must have looked far away. "You all right, Mama?" "I'm just tired," I lied. "But you can't lie to someone who was raised by your moods." He tilted his head. "You found something, didn't you?" I didn't ask how he knew. Some things pass through blood, I suppose, like a current. So I handed him one of the letters, not the first, not the last, just one from the middle. He read it in silence, lips tight, eyes unmoving. When he finished, he placed it back down and stared out the window. "I hated him," he said. I nodded. "I still kind of do." I nodded again, but he didn't finish the sentence, just shook his head. And in that silence, we forgave each other for the things we never said, for the grief we never named, for the years we thought our pain was private. He stood up, kissed my forehead, and said, "You did more than anyone should have had to." Then, he left, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe it was true. That night, I dreamed of my younger self. She stood in the kitchen, 19, maybe 20, hair pulled back, apron dusted with flour, music playing low on the radio. I watched her move, so full of hope and effort, folding laundry and baking cornbread at the same time. She turned toward me, smiling. "You made it," she said. "It was hard, but you made it." And I woke up crying. The next week, Ava came again, not alone this time. She brought her mother. Her name was Elise. It had been nearly 40 years since I saw her. She'd aged well, same cheekbones, same mouth, but her eyes, they were quieter, tired in a way that said life had demanded more of her than she expected. We sat outside on the porch. 3 women. One storm of history. Thought she was nervous, hands twisting in her lap. I didn't know, she said, about the letters, about any of it. I believe you, I told her. And I did. Then she asked the question I wasn't ready for. Do you want to know why he left? Child, I already knew. He was scared. Scared of the weight of fatherhood. Scared of needing me more than he thought a man should. Scared of disappointing us all. But I let her speak. He thought he'd ruin you, she said. He told me, years later, that he loved you too much to stay, that he would only break you. That's the curse of cowards. They mistake destruction for mercy. I smiled at her, soft but steady. He didn't ruin me, I said. But he did miss out on something beautiful. After they left, I took a walk to the old cemetery. It was overgrown now, the town too, busy with new homes and strip malls to tend to its ghosts. I found his marker, simple, just his name, no flowers, no epigraph. I sat beside it and let the breeze pull at my skirt. There was nothing I needed to say, no grand declaration, no closure, really, just presence, just peace. And when I stood to leave, I whispered something small, something true. I survived you, and I still became someone good. Child, life has its way of circling back, not to punish you, but to ask if you've learned. And I did. I learned that truth doesn't always come wrapped in justice, that some apologies never reach your doorstep, but they still matter, that you can be wounded and wise, broken and whole. I never got to say goodbye to the man who left, but I did say hello to the woman who stayed. You know, child, they always tell you that the truth will set you free. What they don't say is that sometimes the truth breaks your heart first. After that visit with Elise and Ava, something started to shift inside me. Not all at once, no lightning bolt or grand epiphany, just a slow aching tug at my ribs, like a door creaking open in a part of the house I'd closed off decades ago. I started to remember things, not facts, feelings, the way his voice used to change when he was scared, the way I always filled in the silence, thinking it was love, the way I stopped asking questions the moment I sensed he might leave. I'd spent years believing he walked away because he didn't love us, but now I wasn't so sure. One evening, I found myself back in the attic, looking for an old quilt, and I came across a second box I hadn't noticed before. It was buried under a broken lamp and a yellowed stack of recipes. Inside were papers, old tax returns, birth certificates, and a small manila envelope, unmarked, untouched. I opened it, and what I found made my knees go weak. It was a cassette tape, one of those old ones with the clear plastic casing and tiny handwriting on the label. It read only, for Nora. I hadn't been called that in years, not since he left. Now, I didn't even know if it would play. Who keeps a cassette player anymore? But Tommy, bless him, still had one in his garage. He was always sentimental that way. The next day, he brought it over and left me with it alone. I think he knew I needed to hear it in silence. I pressed play with trembling fingers. The tape crackled, old air, old noise, and then his voice. Nora, if you're hearing this, then either I've finally grown up, or someone braver than me found this for you. I closed my eyes and let his voice wash over me, older, quieter. Not the man. I remembered, not entirely. I wanted to explain, not because I think it changes anything, but because you deserve the truth. I didn't leave you because I stopped loving you. I left because I loved you too much to bring you into my mess. He talked about things I never knew. A diagnosis, depression, back when people didn't call it that. A gambling addiction he'd hidden for years. A moment, one cold January night, where he almost didn't come home because he thought the world would be better without him. I didn't think I deserved a family. I thought I'd ruin you. I thought you were better off without me. He paused. You could hear him breathe. I was wrong. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, the tape spinning into silence, the machine clicking to a stop. I felt like someone had handed me a memory I didn't ask for. Like I was finally being shown the missing scene in a story I thought I'd finished. I had spent decades building my life around his absence, and now, here he was, whispering a confession from the past, like a ghost, trying to make peace. What do you do with that? Do you forgive a man who never asked to be forgiven? Do you carry his regrets alongside your own? No, you don't carry them. You lay them down. A week later, Ava returned. She looked nervous, like she was about to break something fragile. She handed me a folder, thick, worn. I found this in Mom's attic, she said. It's his journal, from the last few years. I opened it slowly. The pages smelled like dust and cologne, Old Spice, maybe, something familiar, and there he was, page after page of letters he never sent, notes about us, drawings of Ava as a baby, even a birthday card for Tommy he never mailed. He never stopped watching from afar, never stopped caring, but he never returned either, and that's the part that gutted me. It would be easier if he'd stopped loving us, easier to hate him, to blame him, but instead, the truth was far more painful. He loved us, and still chose not to come back. See, my dear, love is not enough. It's never been. Love has to show up. It has to stand in the kitchen with tired eyes and carry the weight of diapers and late bills and sick kids. It has to sit with you when you're angry, hold you when you're not easy to love. He felt all the love, but he didn't choose the work, and that's the truth I had to face. Not that he was cruel, not that he was evil, but that he was scared, and he let fear win. I took the journal to the cemetery, sat beside his grave once more. I didn't speak, I didn't need to. Instead, I left the journal there, wrapped in one of his old letters. Not as a gesture for him, but for me, it was time to stop carrying it all, time to stop waiting for someone to fix what they left behind, time to stop being a character in his story and start being the author of mine. Let me tell you something, child. You can't rewrite the past, but you can reclaim it. You can take the silence and make it sing. And sometimes, the truth doesn't set you free, it sets you right. I stood in that cemetery for a long time, not because I was looking for answers anymore, but because I was finally ready to let the questions rest. I didn't feel anger. Not the way you'd expect. What I felt was something colder, sadder, a deep sigh in my bones. A mourning for all that could have been said, should have been said. Harold never came clean. Not truly. Not to me. Not to the boys. Not in any real way that my Tove offered closure. But standing there, reading those clipped words on his headstone, I realized something. He didn't just take the truth with him. He spent his whole life burying it, one lie at a time, until there was nothing left but the hollow echo of a man who ran from everything that asked him to stay. And somehow, I had survived it. All of it. I had survived being made small. I had survived shame I never earned. I had survived the silence, the secrets, the shattered dreams. And now, with the truth finally in my hands, no matter how late, I was left with the one thing he never had the courage to hold. Clarity. I wasn't the broken one. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't unworthy of love, or trust, or family. I was a woman who stayed, who fought, who rebuilt, who raised her sons with everything she had, and then some, who aged with grace, even when no one clapped for her, and I was still here. So I knelt down, knees aching, skirt pressed into the damp grass, and I said the only thing I had left in me to say, I forgive you. Not for him. No, child. That forgiveness wasn't a gift to him, it was a release. For me, a letting go, of the weight, of the waiting, of all the years I carried a hurt that didn't belong to me. Then I stood up, brushed the dirt off my palms, and I walked back to the car, with a spine straighter than it had been in years, because the truth, child, it didn't fix everything, but it freed me, it gave me the final piece of myself I didn't even know it was missing. And that's the thing no one tells you about getting older. The world keeps spinning. The wounds never fully disappear. But there comes a day, if you're lucky, if you're still standing when you look at it all and say, I made it, not untouched, but unbowed. And that, my dear, that is enough. You reach a certain age, child, and people expect you to be full of answers. But the truth is, the older you get, the more you realize how much you'll never know. I sat on the porch that morning, tea in hand, slippers on, the air just starting to warm, and I looked out at the same trees that had stood watch over this house for decades. My boys were grown now, one with a daughter who wouldn't return my calls, the others sending cards at Christmas, but never a visit. And Harold, he was gone, ashes and stone, the secrets with him, except the ones I'd dug up, one thread at a time. But there was one left. A letter, tucked into the back of his old desk, behind a warped drawer. I hadn't opened it, not for days. I told myself I needed time, that I was waiting for the right moment, but if I'm honest, I was afraid. Afraid that inside that envelope might be the one thing I wasn't prepared for. More truth, or worse, no truth at all, wasn't addressed. No date, just my name on the front in Harold's handwriting, the one that always leaned left when he was nervous. I opened it on a Wednesday. Funny how ordinary days hold life-changing things. The letter wasn't long. He said, "He never meant to hurt me." A tired phrase, isn't it? He wrote about shame. How it wrapped around him like a second skin. Said he didn't know how to be the man I deserved. So he tried to be the man people expected. He didn't name her, the other woman. Didn't explain the money that disappeared, the silence that grew louder between us year after year. But he ended it with this. "I wish I'd been brave enough to tell you everything, but I thought silence would protect you. And in the end, it just buried us both. I'm sorry for all of it." That was it. No answers, no revelations. Just a man, nearing his end, trying to apologize too late. And so I had a choice. I could tell the boys, show them the letter, let them see the man their father really was, not cruel, not evil, but weak, frightened. Or I could let it lie, leave Harold where he was imperfect, sure, but loved in some small way. Let the dead keep some dignity. It wasn't an easy choice, child. Forgiveness never is, but neither is truth. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my eldest, and I told him to come home. We sat on the porch together, two adults, with more gray between us than conversation, and I told him everything, not to punish, not to blame, but to free us both from the unspoken. He didn't cry, didn't shout, just nodded, slow, as the sun dipped low. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You didn't have to carry this alone, Mom." And I realized I had. All those years, I'd protected them from Harold, from the holes in our story. But maybe I hadn't needed to. Maybe they were stronger than I gave them credit for. Maybe I was too. The next day, I burned the letter, not out of anger, but because I didn't need it anymore. The truth had done its work, and now, it was time to let go. I didn't expose Harold, didn't rewrite history or carve new names into old stones, but I didn't lie either. I told my story, fully, finally, and in doing so, I found my peace. Now, when I sit with the grandkids, the few who still come around, I don't tell them fairy tales. I tell them my tale, the real one, with cracks and grief and grace. Because life isn't a clean story. It's a patchwork, messy, worn, but stitched with the hands of a woman who chose to keep going. And that, child, that's the legacy I leave behind. Not silence, not shame, but strength. Quiet, earned, unshakable. Because in the end, it wasn't the betrayal that defined me, or the pain, or even the truth. It was the choice to stand, again and again, when the world told me to sit quietly. And that's what I want you to remember. Even when the ground shifts, even when the people you love become strangers, even when truth comes too late, you still get to choose how the story ends. And I chose me. I watched the smoke curl into the morning sky like some final goodbye. That letter, all those words I waited decades to hear, it didn't fix anything, not really. But it helped me understand. And sometimes, understanding is the closest thing we'll ever get to healing. I didn't forgive Harold in the way some people expect. I didn't whisper it over his grave, or write it down in a journal. Forgiveness, for me, wasn't about saying it's okay, because it wasn't. Not the lies, not the silence, not the lonely years I spent wondering if it was me, if I had somehow driven him away. But I forgave myself for staying, for not asking more questions, for believing that being quiet was the same as being strong. My life became quieter after that. Not empty, just quieter, more intentional. I sold off the rest of Harold's tools, donated his old clothes. I even took down the wedding photo in the hallway, the one where he stood behind me with his hands on my shoulders, not because I hated him, but because I no longer wanted my house to tell a story that wasn't true. You see, when we hold on to every trace of someone, we start to disappear behind them, and I was tired of disappearing, so I made space for me. I started writing again, little bits of poetry scribbled on napkins and tucked into books. I planted marigolds along the back fence, started making Sunday soup again, just for me, with extra garlic and fresh bread, and slowly, so slowly, I began to feel like a woman again, not just a mother, not just a widow, but me. Then one afternoon, as summer stretched its golden arms across the yard, I heard a knock, not a hard one, gentle, like a question. I opened the door, and there she was, Emma, my granddaughter, the same girl who once walked past me like I was a stranger at the grocery store. She stood there, older now, tall, unsure, a nervous smile twitching at her lips. "Hi, Grandma," she said. "And child." My heart near stopped. I didn't rush forward, didn't scold or ask why it had taken her so long. I just opened the door wider and said, "Come in, sweetheart." I was just making tea. We sat across from each other, two women with too much history and not enough time. She looked around the living room, noticed the empty frame on the wall, the fresh flowers in the vase. "You changed things," she said softly. "I had to," I answered. "Some stories need editing." She smiled then, not wide, just enough, and that was the beginning of something small, but real. I didn't ask her why she'd stayed away. She didn't ask me what had happened. We let the tea do the talking, and the silence sit between us, not heavy, not bitter, just honest. Later that night, after she'd gone, I sat in my chair and cried, not from sorrow, but relief. She remembered my name, so what did I choose? In the end, I chose truth. I chose to speak. Not with anger, not to hurt, but to stop shrinking. I chose to tell my sons, to accept my loneliness without dressing it in lies, to stop defending a man who couldn't even defend himself, and I chose to live, not survive, not endure, but live, with color again, with laughter, with fresh soup on Sundays and birdsongs in the morning. That's what power looks like at my age. Not loud, not vengeful, just honest. And if you're listening, child, I hope you remember this. Sometimes the deepest healing isn't found in who comes back, but in who you become while they're gone. You know, people think this story ends with healing. They're wrong. It ends with me. Not the woman I once was, not the girl from the porch in Kentucky, barefoot and humming Loretta Lynn songs under her breath. Not the mother who carried guilt like it was stitched into her apron pockets. And certainly not the wife who waited beside the same man for answers that never came. No, child. It ends with this version of me, wrinkled, a little slower, but standing, still standing. That's the thing nobody tells you when you get old. You don't become someone else. You just become more of who you've always been. Quieter, maybe, but sharper. You see people clearer. You see yourself clearer. I still dream about my granddaughter sometimes. Not the moment she walked past me like I was air. No, that's faded now. What I dream about is her knock. That tiny sound at the door that carried more apology than words ever could. And in the dream, she always says the same thing. "Hi, Grandma," and I always open the door. You see, my deep's pain doesn't always make a sound. Sometimes it just sits beside you while you pour tea and carry on. But if you let it, if you really let yourself feel it, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes wisdom. I look back now and I realize I was never invisible. I just got so good at making space for everyone else that I forgot how to take up any for myself. That's a mistake I hope you never make. You don't owe your silence to people who hurt you. You don't owe your forgiveness to the dead. And you, sure as sugar, don't have to keep living inside stories that were written without your truth. Tell the truth, child. Even if your voice shakes, tell it for the woman you were. Tell it for the mother you tried to be. Tell it for the granddaughter who still carries your laugh in her memory, even if she forgot your name for a while. We all get lost sometimes. But if you're lucky, and I mean real lucky, someone will still be waiting with warm tea and soft light when you find your way back. Maybe that's what love really is. Not the grand gestures, not the perfect marriages or perfect families, but the porch light that stays on, just in case. And yes, there are still days when the ache comes back. A memory, a song, a Sunday without anyone to cook for. But I sit with it now. I don't push it away. I don't make it pretty. I let it speak, and when it's done, I remind it, I'm still here. So, if you listened to the whole story, my sweethearts, thank you. Thank you for sitting with me through the cracks and the confessions, the silences and the strength. Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Would you have burned that letter? Would you have let her back in? And don't forget to like and subscribe. Stories like this, they deserve to live on. Because somewhere out there, another grandmother is sitting with a cup of tea and a heart full of untold truths. Let's not let her go unheard. Good night, child. Be gentle with yourself. Granny loves you.